Hello and welcome to another Official Watches YouTube video here at Jardin du Mayfair. Heaven on earth for the watch enthusiast. I am so excited to say it's a channel first for our community. We have been sent a very special watch for review. It is none other than the Ulysse Nardin Freak One 2405 500 2A/3A. And I tell you what, this watch is very special, and I have a very special story about how we got it. So, Matthew Haviland, if you are watching, this is dedicated to you. What do you get when you cross the Millennium Falcon with a wristwatch? You get this, the seriously epic Ulysse Nardin Freak. First launched in 2001, the Freak was the result of the two titans of the industry, Rolf Schneider, who was UN's owner, and Dr. Ludwig Ulysse, a top-tier watchmaker. They put their heads together to create something that was not only hyper-modern, but spectacular to boot. Now, I'm going to ask you to grab a coffee at this point and maybe even a sandwich, because this is a big review. Now, usually I like to keep things vaguely concise, but in order to really get the Freak, you've got to put some of the pieces of the horological jigsaw puzzle together. In simple terms, Schneider and Ulysse are the horological equivalent of Indiana Jones and, fittingly, Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Now, if you have a bit of background on these two legends, then the development of the Freak makes complete sense. Schneider was a traveller and an adventurer. His watch journey started in the advertising department of Jaeger-LeCoultre in Geneva before moving briefly to London. In 1958, he moved to Thailand to work for a Swiss company and dealing with distribution throughout Asia, including that of watches. A decade later, he launched the Cosmo Component Company in Thailand, which sold watch parts to Switzerland before moving to Malaysia and establishing Pressima, which along the same lines supplied the Swiss out of Kuala Lumpur. Now, amongst all of his watch-related dealings and extensive travel, he also managed to raft down the River Kwai and visit China during the Cultural Revolution. Images of this were published in Life magazine. He built his home, Pressima House, in Kuala Lumpur, which he used as a base while splitting his time between Asia and Switzerland. When he returned in 1983, he raced skeleton bobsleds and purchased Ulysse Nardin, as you do. Now, UN was one of the many manufacturers that was brought to its knees by the quartz crisis of the 70s. Originally founded in 1864, they specialised in the production of marine chronometers and instruments. Schneider knew that in order to pull off a phoenix-style rise from the ashes, he had to offer something drastically unique to make the company competitive and, more to the point, viable again. Now, one of his first interventions was to hire Ludwig Ulysse. This came about after Schneider had visited the workshop of Jörg Sporing, a renowned watchmaker. He noticed and immediately fell in love with a spectacular clock that was hanging from the workshop wall. It was an astrolabe clock that could calculate the position of the stars, and it was a creation of Sporing's apprentice. You guessed it. Now, Ludwig Ulysse was an extraordinary philosopher, archaeologist, and undeniably genius watchmaker who was responsible for the complete restoration of the Farnese clock, a hugely complex astronomical clock that was in the Vatican Library and had over 1,000 components. His work with the Farnese clock led to the 1995 Prix Gaia Award for History and Research after he painstakingly studied, reassembled and reverse engineered the clock to aid future servicing, as it was originally built in 1725 with zero schematics. He also built an exact replica of the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek and oldest example of an analog computer used to predict astronomical positions and events decades into the future. That is some seriously top-level stuff. Huge accolades aside, I think possibly the part of Dr. Ulysse's story that resonates with me the most is the tale of him having a small centimetre square mirror pinned to a beret so that those who annoyed him in daylight were to be treated as an unpleasant glare in the sun if he tilted his head at them. Superb. In later years, from 2001 to 2014, Oeschlein served as curator and director of the Museum of International Horology and now owns Ox & Junior. Rolf Schneider sadly passed away in 2011. Now back to the 80s though, and Schneider, prompted by the astrolabe he adored on Sporing's wall, asked Oeschlein if he could make something like that into a wristwatch. Thanks to his work on the Farnese clock, the answer was an emphatic yes, and in 1985, Ulysse Nardin launched the astrolabium Galileo Galilei, which promptly inserted itself into the Guinness Book of World Records for being the watch with the most functions in the world. These guys were no joke. This thing had more moves than you could shake a stick at. 21 functions, local and solar time, orbits, eclipses, sun, moon, stars, the full works, all packed into a 40mm case. It was the inspiration behind modern astrological pieces today. The Patek Sky Moon, the Celestial, none of them without the Ulysse Nardin astrolabium. The watch was an absolute triumph and lifted the new UN from the post-quartz doldrums to a superpower of complication and manufacture. They added the Planetarium Copernicus in 1988, which was my birth year, and the Tellurium Johannes Kepler in 1992 to create a lineup called the Trilogy of Time. A decade after Schneider's purchase, Ulysse Nardin was well and truly back in business. The Freak was launched in 2001 after the renaissance of the 90s, and it hit the scene at a time where watchmaking was really beginning to look to the new and exciting. Richard Mille had arrived on the scene in the same year, and AP was busy building its concept Royal Oaks. Switzerland was looking to the future for inspiration. Ultra-modern was in. Banging standard movements into the same old cases was out, and the Freak was in its absolute element. Completely new and avant-garde, the Freak had no dial, no crown, and used a linear movement that showcased its gear train and escapement while revolving leisurely around the dial space at 1 rotation per hour while pointing to the minutes. The hour hand sat beneath the carousel. Okay guys, we're about halfway, and I have to say, I can't resist it. I want to get it out and have a look. It is so cool. I saw it at Watches and Wonders, but to have it here in Jardin du Mayfair is so special. This watch is incredible. I really love what they've done with this piece. The watch looked like a spaceship in orbit and blew the industry apart, not simply for its looks, but because in addition to being unlike anything else, it also featured a new dual direct escapement which uses silicone wheels. Silicone had never been used before in watchmaking, and the creation of a new escapement was a very big deal. A very big deal indeed, and the likes of which hadn't been done since George Daniels invented the coaxial escapement in 1976. The Freak was wound by rotating the case back, and at the time was set by a rotating bezel. It was pure genius back then, and without a doubt one of the most influential watches in recent history. So let's fast forward 23 years with the Freak line up, growing from strength to strength, and we arrive at Watches and Wonders 2024, where a particularly dashing YouTube presenter is cutting about the floor, bringing you all the best bits from the show. It was at Watches and Wonders where I met and was delighted to spend a fair whack of my time talking to Mathieu Haviland, the managing director of Ulysse Nardin. I was talking to him about the brand and admiring the new UN collection, particularly the Freak One, which I am subsequently delighted to have in hand for your viewing pleasure today. Now, if you haven't seen my full interview with Mathieu, please do check that Watches and Wonders video out. It's live now and doing really well. So, here we have it. This is the Freak One. The reference is 2405502A/3A, and it's a beast made from DLC coated titanium with a rose gold bezel. The rose works as an absolute treat to soften the all-black look. The watch and the surfaces have a satin matte sheen to them. It weighs in at not much, all due to the lightweight quality of titanium, and it sits at 12mm high, so broad but quite slim is the name of the game here. It's also completely symmetrical due to the lack of crown. The watch doesn't look as broad as its stats suggest due to the dark case, which works to minimise the overall dimensions. This doesn't wear like a Panerai, it wears like a Pelagos. Following its forefathers, the Freak One has no crown, no dial and no hands. The movement acts to tell the time as it revolves around, which is beautifully finished beneath the main event in a deep black guilloche. That's a pattern which speaks to the level of finishing and proper old school handiwork that UN is capable of, if you look beyond the crazy mechanics. The expert finishing isn't just present on the dial though, it also follows through the entirety of the watch, which due to its very nature has a lot of exposed parts, all of which are very clearly finished and detailed from the brushed bridges down to the polished bezel and the notches beyond. Despite being presented on a very nice black ballistic patterned strap, water resistance is 30 meters, so really only splash and rainproof. I will say though, in this colour scheme, it's probably not much of a holiday piece anyway. Given the nature of the rotating bezels being integral to the movement, this is entirely forgivable, and the strap and its deployant are both comfortable to wear with nothing digging in the underside of the wrist, as can sometimes be the case with these styles of folding clasps. Now, how to tell the time? The balance escapement and gear train are mounted to a bridge underneath the minute hand, so if you look to the tip of the train, you'll find an arrow pointing to the minutes on the rehort. It can be tricky to concentrate on the time with the Freak because the ever-spinning, oversized blue silicone oscillator is quite hypnotic. This, of course, should come as no surprise because the rig is effectively a flying tourbillon, and we all like to look at those. The base dial is made up of a series of rings. These are not solid state. There is a rotating ring towards the centre of the dial which hosts the hour arrow. Both pointers have a healthy dose of luminova to guide you in the right direction in low light conditions, although general legibility is no problem at all thanks to the contrast of rose gold over matte black. If you look beneath the bezel at 6, you'll see a Freak button. It is not a strap release system. Pushing it unlocks the bezel, which you use to rotate to set the time of the watch before pushing the button back into place. Once set to relock again, the bezel locks. This is totally ingenious and simple, as the bezel has some nice notching for grip and ease of use. If you flip to the rear, then not only do you get a lovely view of the UN automatic caliber 240, which is powering the watch and providing a not too shabby 90 hours of power reserve thanks to a massive mainspring that is powered by a completely different type of rotor, which is called the grinder system. It's one of the most effective winding systems in the entire industry. You can also see that spinning around the outer edges of the caliber. It's really nice. To wind the Freak, you need to press down on the ring surrounding the case back in order to engage it to wind mode and turn the ring in the same direction as the engraved arrows to wind the watch. When fully wound, release pressure on the ring and it lifts and locks back into place. It's a little like pushing down to open a child-proof cap, and it prevents accidental winding of the movement and its mechanism. It's such a pleasant experience, and honestly, having played with the Freak, I will never look favourably on a conventional crown again. This is not fiddly, it's very, very special. I suppose to sum up this review, I would urge you to check out an Ulysse Nardin, and the Freak One in itself has blown me away. Now, this is our first UN review, but having spent a lot of time researching the brand and taking a step away from the mainstream, it is remarkable just how much Ulysse Nardin has given to horology in the past couple of decades. I enjoy doing the research, and their research on new mechanisms and materials has opened up a huge number of doors for the industry. For example, the use of silicon is almost second nature in manufacturing now, but it all started with Ulysse Nardin. In summary, the Freak forged the path for new design, new ways of time telling, new escapements, and used new materials to boot. But suffice it to say, the new Freak One took home the GPHG Icon Award in 2023 for very good reason. Now, as this is the first watch that we have been sent for review, I think I should just say a little disclaimer that we have received absolutely no money for this review, and I have said exactly what I think of the watch with no guidance whatsoever. I think this thing is really cool, and I'm really excited to see where these guys go with their new models. The meat and potatoes. The price of this watch at time of review is £62,460 in the UK. Guys, I have to say, I've tagged Matthew Haviland in the description. Please do give him a follow. His Instagram is so interesting. The guy is a visionary. Thank you for joining me here at Jardin du Mayfair, heaven on earth for the watch enthusiast.